Welcome to episode 4 of Attacking the Paint. I'm your host, James Ivy Williams, and today we have with us Matt Babcock. Matt is the senior NBA basketball analyst for Basketball News. Matt and I are going to discuss his upbringing in a historical basketball family, his life as a NBA agent, and his transition into the sports media field with Babcock Hoops, and then moving on to Basketball News. All this and more today on Attacking the Paint.
All right. So, Matt Babcock of Basketball News, I thank you so much for jumping on the pod with me. This will be episode 4 of season 2. So this is my first guest of the season. We've been pretty much talking about high school rankings and basketball events that we've covered the first three episodes. So that you're the first guest of the new season. So welcome to the show.
No, thanks, James. I appreciate it. And yeah, I feel lucky being the first guest of the season. I didn't even know that. So that's great.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Matt, me and you have known each other for a few years now. We see each other. I call ourselves road warriors, as we always kind of see each other in random places across the country. I think the last time I saw you, I feel like was Indy, maybe, or
yeah,
Memphis.
Indy. Remember, I think I was sitting with you. We watched Dylan Mitchell lock up Amani Bates, and that's when Dylan Mitchell first got on my radar. And no, it's always great seeing you on the road. And I mean, if I'm going anywhere east at all, and it's a high school event, chances are you're going to be there. So it's always nice to bump into you.
For sure. Good stuff. Well, Matt, we'll jump right into it. So if you guys don't know Matt, he's a Babcock, and so if you guys don't know the Babcock name, I'll let Matt kind of give you guys a little bit of insight about his family and their ties to the NBA over the past few decades, really.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, sort of my standard line is, I was born into a Babcock family, right? Basketball family. My oldest uncle, Pete, started working in the NBA in the, I think, mid-late 70s as a volunteer scout and worked his way up to be, long-time general manager of several different teams: San Diego Clippers, Denver Nuggets, Atlanta Hawks. My middle uncle, Rob, who's passed away, he followed in his footsteps and worked in the NBA for a really long time, became a general manager as well for the Toronto Raptors. And then my dad, who's the youngest of the three brothers, was a college coach for 15 years, and he's now been in the NBA for 26 years, 25 of them with the Milwaukee Bucks. Just got his ring yesterday. The players and coaches got theirs at the beginning of the season, but he got his ring yesterday, and we're all pumped. And my two cousins, now work as coaches. One with the Sixers, one's with the Nuggets organization, and then there's me, who's had sort of a unorthodox, career paths in basketball. But that's just sort of our family in a nutshell.
Okay, well, for me, that sounds like fun, I guess, because I'm the only person in my family who's pursued a career path like this. But we like sports, but to actually be able to be around it a lot and have different family members, things like that. Tell me what's life like. Let's say Thanksgiving, right? So, we just had Thanksgiving a few months ago, or last month rather. So, let's say all the basketball guys are at the table. What's it like having a conversation? Because I feel like I'm always the smartest basketball person in my family. So it's really boring when you can't really have good dialogue. Tell me what a basketball conversation is like at the family table.
Yeah, it's really all I've ever known, because we were all born into me and my cousins, specifically, we're all I'm the oldest of the three of us, but Chris is 1 year younger than me, and his little brother Nate is 1 year younger than him. So we're all really close in age, and we really grew up together like brothers, and basketball has really been our bond, similar to my dad and his brothers. And so we've always talked hoops. We've gone to games together. We've all kind of followed our dads and our uncles around, our entire lives. And Thanksgiving dinner, it's talking hoops and playing hoops. It's been our life forever. And we all were players. None of us played professionally, but we all played in college, and we've all known at least with my cousins, that our whole lives that we were going to work in basketball. And yes, it's pretty much we live and breathe basketball, from the beginning of our lives until now.
Gotcha. Okay, good stuff. So I always ask this question: can you recall your earliest basketball memory, or the earliest basketball memory that maybe had an impact on you? I mean, I know you say so. I know you grew up in it, but like maybe when you're a kid, maybe there's something else that you think you want to do before you decide to go to basketball. Is there a moment or a series of moments that maybe have that took place that you decided this is what I want to do?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people identify me now as being, quote unquote NBA kid, part of the NBA Babcock family,
Mm,
former agent. And for myself, I've always looked at myself as a coach's son and a player.
mm,
And so everything I've always done in basketball has been from, sort of that lens.
mm,
Even now, I mean, today, when I'm asked to interview about, being interviewed about certain players and getting nitpicky on guys and
mm,
sometimes people get a little sensitive about the criticism, right? But I mean, the way I look at it is, I think like a coach, I think like a
mm,
scout, I think like an NBA, personnel member. And um, constructive criticism is a part of basketball. And so, like the way I look at it is, okay, if I'm evaluating a guy and I'm not being honest, I'm
mm,
not doing the game any favors. And so, the reason I say all this is my earliest memories are being a coach's son.
gotcha.
My dad, coaching at San Diego State when I was being an assistant coach at San Diego State when I was a little kid, or the head coach at junior college in Phoenix College, running around, while the team's practicing or get on the team bus. That's when I became a real basketball person. It's just
Hmm.
as a little kid running around the gym, going in the locker room at halftime when my dad's giving, speeches, stuff like that.
Hmm.
That's my childhood of being a coach's son is what's influenced me the most.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So you are a coach. Are a true coach's kid. That's that's I like that. I like that.
In my mind.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. For
Right.
sure. Okay. So coach's kid, and a hooper, right? So you play basketball. You played at Arizona. Am I right? Arizona.
Yeah, so I was a pretty good high school player, and
Mm,
then I played at a JUCO in Florida. I
okay.
played for Gulf Coast Community College in the Panhandle, which back then JUCOs were really
Yeah.
competitive. I mean, most of the guys in that conference ended up playing Division One. I was recruited. I had injury problems.
Mm,
Yeah, I wasn't good enough to be recruited to Arizona level, but I was
mm,
getting recruited by a number of low D1s, mid D1s, and just really had a hard time staying on the floor. I just all kinds of tendonitis problems, like
gotcha.
5 different spots, my knees and legs, and pretty much decided, I wanted to go to as big a program as I possibly could, just because I knew I wanted to work in basketball, and I thought the experience would be beneficial. You kind of
Hmm.
learn the ropes, how it works, networking and whatnot. And so I went to Arizona, which is where I grew up. I grew up in Arizona, and so I mean, always idolized Lute Olson and his teams, and you got a chance to be a part of that team for a little while, which was great.
Good stuff. What years were you there?
Um, so the 0405
Okay.
was the team I was on. Our
Okay.
top players were Channing Frye, Salim
Yep.
Stoudemire, Son Adams. We were, I mean, I thought we were the most talented team in the country. We ended up losing to Darren Williams and the Elite Eight in
Yeah.
Illinois.
Yeah. Darren
Um,
Williams and D Brown, right?
E. Brown, James
Yep.
Augustine. Yeah, they had a really good team.
Yeah. You guys were
Roofer
loaded
Head.
though. Yeah. You
Oh
guys
yeah,
were
we
loaded
were, we
though.
were really good. I mean, Salim Stoudemire. I mean, everybody, now. I mean, Channing Frye is the big name, and don't get me wrong, Channing was a great player too. Salim in college, oh that guy was unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of before his time too. Just he was a modern day point guard back then. Because I
Sure.
mean, the way he shot the ball, the way he handled, that's what guys do on a regular basis. And it was probably he probably was just like I said before his time, and you know, 15 years later he'd be a stud probably. He ain't getting
Sure.
paid a lot. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and he had a couple good years with the Hawks, and
Mhm.
career didn't last as long as I thought it would. But oh man, college, he's one of the best college players I've ever been around.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so tell me about so you go to Arizona, you're around the program. Lou Olson is a legend. Um, how do you what gives you the agent bug? What makes you decide to go that way as opposed to being a coach? You're a coach's kid. What makes you decide to say I want to be an agent instead?
Well, I mean, I honestly never planned to be an agent. I always thought I was going to get into coaching and then to probably
Hmm.
eventually scouting front office and really just follow my dad's footsteps. And,
Hmm.
leaving Arizona, I knew I wanted to work in basketball. There was no question that the only jobs I'd even look at would be in the basketball industry. And it's hard to get a job when you're 21 years old, and even though I was well connected,
Hmm.
um, there's not a lot of good opportunities for young people. Everybody's got to kind of grind, and myself included. And my first job opportunity was a summer intern at Wasserman Media Group, which at the time was the largest agency in sports.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take that job thinking I wanted to be an agent, but did give me some exposure to the agent business and what my main responsibility was. In addition to doing typical intern stuff of coffee runs, and back then we had fax machines right after some faxes out.
Right.
A lot of kids probably don't even know what that is, right?
Right. They don't.
And then, but the key responsibility I had was I was working with Dave Yeager, former Kings and Grizzlies head coach. He was a D League coach at the time,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously now the G League. I'm aging myself here. But he and I did all the pre-draft workouts, and so I was like his assistant coach. We had 7 first-round picks that year, so I did that for several months. Ended up doing a lot of cool stuff. Managing JJ Redick, Joel Freeland. Traveled with him to all his pre-draft workouts, and still thought I was going to be on the coaching path. And my first job, full-time job from there, was an assistant coach for Virtus Bologna in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
It was and I'm actually working as a scouting advisor for them now too, after 15 years. But it was an interesting deal. They brought me on, wanted me to kind of focus more on like player development. So I was working with their players, working with their youth team. They didn't pay me anything. They just covered all my expenses, but it was a top level team in Europe. Did that first season and
Mm-hmm.
got a little homesick. They wanted me to sign a multi-year contract. And, I was 22, 23 by myself living in a foreign country. I got a little homesick and
Yeah.
had an opportunity to take a job with Excel Sports Management, which is a big sports agency. And they wanted me at the time, the company was based in LA, which it's now in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Goldfeder, who's the head of Excel, Jeff Schwartz' partner, he and I had become friends, and he was a family friend. He wanted to groom me to be an agent. Took that job, went to LA, and sort of the rest is history as far as the agency business. I bounced around a lot. I mean, too much to be honest with you. But I think I had once I kind of stepped into that industry, I had a lot of interest from agents and agencies to hire me.
Mm-hmm.
I think mostly because of my family, and I was so well connected. They thought I was sort of a ticket of connections to helping them get players, or
Mm-hmm.
that maybe just a additional credibility boost of having somebody from my family working for them. But
Right.
I ended up doing that for 10 years. Ultimately became my own agent, had my own agency, represented a lot of guys in the NBA and internationally. So I really just kind of fell into it. And after 10 years, after probably 7 or 8 years, I was kind of getting a little worn out with some of the negative parts of that business. The recruiting is just totally cutthroat.
Yeah.
It's just really an emotional roller coaster of a business. And I missed, being a true basketball person. And so I talked to my wife, talked to my family, and tried to put together some kind of plan of kind of getting out and getting, closer to the basketball. And, I made a drastic move and pulled the plug on my agent career.
I understand. Hey, listen, I think it takes, there's a Steve Harvey line. He said, sometimes you just have to jump. Whatever it is that you want to do, just screw it and just jump off the ledge, and eventually you'll land where you're supposed to land. And so I take that to heart everywhere. So I appreciate that you did it, and it makes me feel good to know that you jumped for what you wanted to do, and I know you're doing it, so that's pretty cool too.
No, I appreciate it. It was not an easy thing to do, and really, it took me a few years to really get things rolling. With what I'm doing now, and which is a whole other long story of how I fell into this exactly. But it was a worthwhile move for me, and I appreciate you saying all those things.
Yeah, for sure. Another cool connection. So I know you said you worked in Bologna. I was about 25 days away from moving to Bologna about 5 years ago. I was going to go to the University of Bologna. They had a master's program, an English speaking master's program, and they wanted a bunch of Americans in it. I got in, and at the last minute, I had to pull out just for some family stuff. But I was super excited about going, and I had a whole plan already about just being in school there, but then traveling all around Europe covering basketball. And so that was the plan. I was going to be there for a year, just get get immersed in the culture over there and watch a ton of basketball. So that was kind of the plan.
Yeah, no, it's too bad you weren't able to do it. I love Bologna, and it's an interesting place. So it's northern Italy, and it's a college town. I think if I remember correctly, it's the oldest university in the world.
In the world, yeah.
and it's a really great town. It's not a real touristy place, but it's big enough where there's a lot going on. And you really get the full Italian culture, the
Hmm.
food. I mean, it's known for its food in a country that's known for its food, right?
Right.
So it's like the food's off the hook, and then it's a basketball town too. So I mean, like back when I was working there, the two teams, Virtus and Clomamio, were the two top teams in Italy, and the rivalry was thick. There's no soccer teams there at the time, and just such a great experience.
For sure. For sure. I still want to go at some point, and I plan to. So once this whole COVID thing kind of clears, and I want to get on a plane and head over there at some point, and just spend a couple weeks and just kind of see what I
Yeah, you
missed out
should.
on. Yeah, for sure. Um, okay, so you take the leap and you leave the agency business. Um, and is that pretty much exactly when you started Babcock Hoops, or was there a transition period before the agent business to Babcock Hoops?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a transition. I mean, I thought about getting out of the agency business for a few years. I actually verbally agreed to take an NBA scouting job 2 years before I actually got out, and
Hmm.
the deal fell through and all that. But um, yeah, and and it was kind of one of those things like, how do you gracefully get out of the agency business? I mean, I was representing all kinds of different players, and
Hmm.
it was a situation where I stopped recruiting players, but I still was signing guys that kind of fell in my lap,
Right.
relatively easily. And
Hmm.
um, you know, it just it boiled over at a certain point, right? And I was just like, all right, I have to do something drastic to get out of here. And so I kind of helped all my clients find new agents.
Hmm.
Was able to sort of cash out a little bit just to kind of give me a little bit of a cushion to make an aggressive, career change.
Hmm.
And so I pretty much, I remember it was probably October or November, and I had no plans of what I was going to do. I wanted to work in the NBA. I had some teams interested in hiring me, but nobody actually pulled the trigger. I called Ryan Blake, who's a good family friend.
Hmm.
His dad was Marty Blake, who's
Yep.
passed away, but they had, Marty Blake and Associates. It was a scouting service that was put together by the NBA a long time ago. I asked him if I could scout for him, just volunteer scout for him for the year. He agreed and started going to games. Paid my own way, and would get credentialed for Marty Blake and Associates. Started doing reports.
Hmm.
Really, just even though I had grown up in scouting, it was the first time I was formally scouting myself,
Hmm.
and really just want to get some experience and kind of get my feet wet, for myself, and kind of figure out how I fit into the Basco ecosystem, aside from being an agent, and
Right.
did that for a year. And then in the spring, Sports Illustrated reached out to me, wanted me to write a series of stories about the pre-draft process from an agent's perspective, and so I agreed to do that. Even though I was shocked anybody wanted me to write for them, especially Sports Illustrated, who's I had Sports Illustrated covers on my walls as a kid. I mean, it
Yeah.
was by far been my favorite magazine growing up, and so I did that, and that was sort of my entry point to the media. I mean, through Marty Blake and Associates, I kind of got a grip of like how credentials worked and just sort of like all the protocols
Hmm.
of being credentialed to games, and where you sit, how you operate,
Hmm.
and then started writing with Sports Illustrated. And I put together this plan of creating Babcock Hoops,
Hmm.
where we started doing our own articles, scouting on our own. And I had some friends that were former NBA scouts that were in between jobs, and
Hmm.
kind of rallied the troops and kind of put together a network of scouts where we're covering the draft and doing different basketball and NBA related articles. And one thing led to another. We started really rolling. We got a lot of attention, and started getting we went from being hounding people to give us credentials and let us in, and to people requesting us to come. And
Right.
I started getting a lot of interview requests, and it really just kind of took on a life of its own. And did that for a couple years maybe, and then basketballnews.com started, and they
Hmm.
reached out to me and essentially wanted to buy out our media scouting services. And so now I run their NBA draft coverage, their scouting department. And also, just to backtrack a little bit, is during that time I started getting a lot of people calling me asking for advice,
Hmm.
agents, players, teams, um, and I started getting busy, and I had pretty much like no cash flow for a while. So I started charging
Yeah.
people, and they, to my surprise, they agreed to pay me. And so
Hmm.
then the more deals that come around, I charge a little bit more, and sort of organically, I had a consulting business
Hmm.
kind of evolve. And so when I did the deal with Basketball News, I sort of converted Babcock Hoops from being like an independent media outlet to a consulting company. And so now that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm working for all different different people and entities in basketball, doing a wide range of things, just, utilizing my different, my different, skills and experiences in basketball, and while, being a media member for Basketball News. And I got to say, I mean, we sort of touched on it earlier. Like, I mean, I made this big risky move, but it's really worked out, because I think I'm in the perfect role for my personality and my interests and all of that. I'm just really, really happy.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I will say that you definitely. I know for a fact I bugged you a few times about how to get credentials when I first started, and so and it's helped for sure. So like now, a few years later, I'm kind of rolling the same way where like before, where I was hounding people, people wouldn't let me in, and they don't know who I am. To now, it's pretty easy for the most part. Now, I mean, every now and then you come across somebody who just it's so random sometimes too. Where I tell my team now, I can get into a really big school that I probably shouldn't get into, and then the tiniest little school that maybe has one player that somebody wants to see, it gives me the hardest time. And so it's just there's no rhyme or reason sometimes, but for the most part, things kind of have rolled pretty smoothly. And again, I remember very vividly calling you, asking you like, how do I get credentialed for college games? I have no idea who to call, what I'm
Right.
supposed to do, and you kind of put me on the path to kind of reach out to certain people, and it's worked out. So I thank you for that for sure on that on
No,
that on that side.
of course.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of the transition from Babcock to Basketball News. So what is it? So the process of like you said, them kind of absorbing Babcock Hoops from I guess a scouting service, and now you kind of running their draft draft I guess draft prep, or I guess you're the senior draft analyst. Is that the right term? Is that the right
Yeah,
title?
that's my title. Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, I handle everything that's NBA draft related or scouting related. So we also cover some high school,
Mhm.
international. So the NBA draft's sort of our bread and butter, but yeah, I sort of run our whole department that is anything scouting related.
For sure. Okay. Um, so with that, you just hit on the next topic. So running the entire, I guess, NBA draft stuff and high school stuff. Um, Draft is, we're a month and a half into the season, right? I know you guys put out your mock, your first mock of the year. Was that the first mock of the year you put out?
No, we do a big board through the season. I think that, no, we've done a number of updates on our big board. I think we started the first one the first week of the season. But yeah, we
Okay.
just updated today, and
Okay.
and really, the early ones are the hardest,
Yeah.
because we've got the smallest sample size we'll have all year with these guys in college uniforms. Of course, I mean, like we touched on earlier, like I cover high school, so I know most of these kids. We got
Hmm.
Jason Felipe in Europe. He's watching the top international prospects when they're 15, 16, 17 years old. So
Hmm.
we get a head start. It's still really hard, doing these big boards early, but we go really, myself especially, I go really hard November and December,
Hmm.
just to kind of get my bases covered, so I could, at least have some kind of idea of what I'm talking about here.
For sure. For sure. So we did our first mock series last year, or last season. Um, and it was the most difficult thing I had done. I had never done it before.
Mhm.
And same thing, I've always kind of like November, December, you try to hit all the tournaments, the preseason tournaments where you've got a contingency of people in one place, so you can go see multiple people at one time. And here and there, the better out of conference games are happening, so you can kind of measure competition and skill set. But the idea of pulling people together to do it. So you watch this group of people, you watch this conference, you watch this. It was Matt. It was probably the most difficult thing I've done since I started, and it was just like whoa. And so now I'm thinking you're saying like you guys are updating the big board like all the time. I can't imagine doing it on a regular basis because it's overwhelming. And then like you said, you want to be honest and you want to be truthful about who you're seeing in the evaluations, because or not you're cheating the game. And
Right.
so like it's hard. You want to make sure that you're being clear and concise, especially, and then when you disagree with the contingency of people, right? So if all the other major outlets are saying, well, this guy's the number one pick, and I'm like, well, I don't think so. And based on what I'm seeing, I can't put him in that same spot.
Right.
So how do you is it just like I know this to be true already, but I'll just ask the question anyway. So when you see somebody and you say, well, I don't agree with what everyone else says, is there ever any pushback from the powers that be to say, hey, well, everyone else is saying this. Are you sure you want to do that? Or is it just like, hey, I'm rocking with this. This is the guy I think is the better player, and this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I look at every player when I'm evaluating them and trying to decide how they fit into our rankings.
Mhm.
And it's really just case by case, and but I do consider everything. I mean, I think I would be remiss if I kind of excluded different variables when I'm evaluating a player or evaluating a draft as a whole.
Right.
One thing that I do, I really try to take a step back at times and acknowledge the fact that everybody within basketball has different experiences, different background that influences the way they see the game, or the way they think the game should be played,
Mhm.
which subsequently makes everybody look at each player a little bit differently, right? And I try and respect different opinions. I mean, there's a number of things that I do that I know a lot of people don't like. Like, for
Mhm.
example, I still do 5 traditional positions internally, just for my organization of
Mhm.
tracking the guys. I rank them, point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. I mean, this day and age, I know that gets criticized by a lot of people, but it
Mhm.
allows me to organize it all in my head properly to allow me to come to comprehensive evaluation of a guy. And so, like, that's just an example of something that works for me that
Mhm.
might not work the same way for somebody else. And so,
Right.
um, you know, and so when you're looking at rankings and comparing one person's rankings to another, it's really hard. We're always going to disagree on some level or another.
Right.
And the other part of it too is it's such an inexact science. I mean, everybody
Mhm.
wants to be quick to do a redraft, and there's so many different variables that's going to lead to a player succeeding or not succeeding. And a lot of this is my experience before I was a draft analyst, as an agent or as a
Mhm.
player, or just being around my family, watching them like deal with players and build teams and whatnot. Is if a guy doesn't get a good opportunity, he's probably not going to succeed, and vice versa. And so
Mhm.
there's so many guys that. That they kind of fall into those traps or get put in the perfect situation to thrive. And so
Right.
it really makes it a hard business. And I'm not trying to make any excuses for the mistakes I made on players. I mean, we all do it.
Mhm.
But it is a very challenging business from that standpoint.
Yeah. But I think the fact that you even identifying that people are different, it's like to somehow almost put someone in a box, right? And this is what we do, right? So you're evaluating someone and you're trying to project them based on a a, a, a variety of aspects, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's a person, right? And who knows something that you probably didn't find out on Intel that probably just slipped through the cracks for a reason, or who knows what he's going to be like if he gets $10 million, right? Those are
Mm.
the first probably like most impactful variables. And like there's something in his past that could happen that could affect him. What is he gonna do when he gets a lot of money, right? But then you hit another point. Where you get drafted is a huge determining factor if you're going to be successful or not. If your coach, I mean, back in the day, there was a lot of coaches that didn't play young players. Just period. You
Mhm.
didn't get played. If you were a high draft pick and your coach didn't play rookies, no matter how good you were in college, you didn't get to play. And so all those things matter, right? And so at the end of the day, I think people who really understand basketball understand that, hey, it's just in this moment, in this time, this is who it is. It doesn't mean that this guy may translate better or may get the opportunity, or maybe it may be a shitty situation, and it may not just work out. And so, I mean, that's why there's change of scenery stuff. Sometimes guys do need a change of scenery and a new voice, a new environment, and so all those things matter. I think people who really identify, and it sounds like that's what you think about, is on top of everything else, there's so many other variables that come into play when identifying skill sets, talents, because that's all people who
Sure.
watch basketball most of the time. That's all they see. Like, can he run? Can he jump? Can he dunk? Can he shoot?
Right. Right.
Which is fine. And I tell people all the time, my grandma can see if a guy can play basketball,
Right.
right? I mean,
No, for
somebody can
sure.
play. If they can play, they can play. But it's all the other things, the intangibles that I think make up a good player, and if they fit a certain culture. Um,
Yeah, one thing that's come to mind there is one thing I talk about a lot with my guys is, you know, we need to get out there and be at arenas and gyms,
mhm,
and get a grip of like what guys' personality types, because like the intel, it's not always just trying to find skeletons in the closet. I mean,
mhm,
sometimes it is, but
right,
but
right,
I mean, sometimes there's negative intel on really good kids. It's like if they have a
yes,
different personality type, like for example, if there's a guy we're looking at as being a potential high lottery pick,
mhm,
and he's not an alpha dog,
mhm,
that's a problem for me, because if you're an NBA team, and granted, everybody will have their own philosophy of like how they do things. If it were me and I'm running a team and I'm drafting, let's say in the top 8, top 10,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, I want that guy to have enough upside, generally speaking, where he has a chance at some point in his career to be our best player or one of our top players.
Mm-hmm.
How many great players are not alpha dogs? Not many, right? I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
we can put together a list, but it's chances are,
Small.
if you're not an alpha, you're probably not, you're not going to be the lead dog, right?
Right.
So like that would naturally have me think a little lesser of a guy as far as how he fits into the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the flip side of that, if we're looking at, say, a second round pick and the guy is an alpha dog, that
Mm-hmm.
might be problematic, because is he going to be
Yes.
willing to accept the roles? Like sometimes you want somebody that could, accept the role, be complementary to your alphas, to your superstars.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we think about all these different things, and you really can't get a grip of that. I mean, I guess you could work the phones and gather information from other people of what they
Mm-hmm.
think about guys' personalities. For me, I trust my own eye. I mean, I grew up in this.
Mm-hmm.
I trust my experience and my skill set to be able
Mm-hmm.
to go into a building and read between the lines. And
For sure.
I do talk to a lot of people, but like I don't take one person's opinion too strongly. It's more of like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I need to gather all this information. They're all different variables, in the equation, and I need to get out there and figure it out for myself. And then, once I've able to kind of get a grip of the guy's body type, his movement, his personality, gather some opinions from other people, that's when we do the deep dive on film and we kind of round it out. And so it's,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of NBA Twitter, NBA draft Twitter was like kind of taking on a huge life of its own, right?
They
And
definitely
I mean, I
have.
love it. All these guys are passionate, just like me and you are, about scouting and watching players. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, I can't imagine being like, for myself, being able to come to a comprehensive evaluation without being there and seeing it for myself.
Yes.
And it's
For sure.
just, and that's not meant to slight anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's just probably the biggest piece of an evaluation for me. And
Yeah.
that's why I spend so much damn time and money
In the gym.
chasing these guys around. And
Right.
I mean, I'm having to sacrifice a lot. I mean, shoot, ask my wife. I mean, it I mean, I get home, it's like, do the dishes, you take out the trash, spend some time with the kids. Like, I
Right.
mean, I'm gone a lot, and
Yeah.
it's because I value that piece of the evaluation process so much that it's worth it for me and in my business.
Yeah, for sure. And I think anybody who's worth their grain or worth their weight as an evaluator, if they don't take that approach to some magnitude, I think they're missing out on something. I feel like you said, you can get information from other people. You can always get bad intel for whatever reason, right? But your eyes in person typically don't lie. What I try to do always is I tell my guys is it's 3 games for me, at least a 3 game minimum in person, so I can get a feel for who they are as a person. Because you never know the first time you see somebody. And again, it's not always going to happen that way, because again, now it's where it was, you're in a region, now you're national, so now you're trying to see kids from the West Coast and the kids from the Northeast, so you can't always see guys 3 times in
Sure.
person, right? But if I'm afforded the opportunity to see you at least 3 times in person, I feel like I have a better feel for who you are as a person, just basketball personality wise, because obviously there's an off court personality, but basketball personality, I can probably get a good feel for you. I tell my guys all the time, watch how they receive information from their coaches, watch how they receive information from their teammates, watch how they react to referees. Watch how if they're on the bench when someone else is playing well, like what are they doing? All those things are character traits for me, and it tells you a lot about a person. Again, it doesn't give you the full scope by any stretch, but it gives you a baseline to say, okay, well, could he, like you said, is he an alpha? Is he not an alpha? And again, a good, I say this too, like sometimes your game has to match your shit, right? So if your shit's up here, if you're alpha but your game's down here, it probably doesn't work. And sometimes vice versa, right? If your
Right.
game's up here but your personality's, your demeanor is meek almost, it
Right.
probably doesn't work either, because maybe in a crunch you're not going to step up. You probably would shy away because it's not your personality to do so. Whether
Sure.
you have the skill and the expertise to do so, your personality says, "Oh, well, I want to get everybody involved." And so all those things like you said, all those things come into play when you're making an evaluation. And I feel like you do it the right way, and it's one of those things that I think you have to respect people who actually take the time and, like you said, sacrifice, because this business is that. Like, I think a lot of the kids I hire often think this is a sexy job, right? Because they hear all the the stuff, but in actuality, you're gone a lot. You're in hotels all the time. You're on planes all the time. You're away from, important events that are going on. Like that kind of stuff takes a toll on a person's mentality as a whole. I mean, that's another. We can have a whole show about that too. Just
Oh,
just
sure.
just being out of the house and what that entails.
Sure. And
Um,
a big part for me that I've sort of learned on the fly is,
mhm,
with my role, as opposed to my dad and my family members that work in the NBA,
mhm,
I don't have any red tape to deal with, and so everybody evaluates excuse me, values intel. And so I
mhm,
mean, I'll go to these college games, and we're all credentialed, media members and scouts, and
mhm,
scouts are running around trying to hound the college assistant coaches to get information about players. And I mean, for me, I'm in a unique spot where being a former agent, and being an evaluator, I guess with some influence, I get to meet a lot of the players and parents before they even go to school. So it's like I
yeah,
don't feel as much pressure. I need to get intel from coaches.
mhm,
I am the source of intel because I know these
mhm,
people. I mean, we go through the draft. I know most of these players and
mhm,
their AU coaches and their parents, and so I've really made it like a conscious effort to get to know these people. And I'm not, obviously not one of these guys that's trying to influence things and be a runner, and sell them
right,
off to agents or anything like that. But like, having these personal relationships, it gives me a lay of the land,
mhm.
which in turn gives me power because information is power.
Information is power.
And so that's another sort of like piece of my you know uh putting value and making traveling a priority. Is like
Mhm.
without me being on the road, I'm not going to get as much done.
Yeah, for sure. I could say this. My business morphed the past 2 years, in particular, into an intel service almost because of the same reason. Like I know all of these. I've known all these kids since high school, and this is the third cycle of. Actually, I think this is the fourth cycle of kids that I've seen from high school to college that'll be transitioned to the NBA this year. I
Sure.
Jabari. I mean, I know he's on your list. We'll talk about him in a second, but like he's the first high school kid I ever scouted. At
Mhm.
first high school event I ever went to, because I came backwards. I did G League, then college, then I came to high school. So the first year I kind of started covering high school, he was the first event I attended. He was there, and so that was the summer after his freshman year. So I've seen him 3 years in high school, AAU. Now he's a stud. And he wasn't a stud when I saw him. Not
Right.
not in a bad way, but he wasn't
Hey, he's a
who
young
he is
kid.
now.
Right.
Exactly. But that kind of the ability to kind of have those relationships, and again, how important are relationships? Just being
Right.
able to be in the room to meet these parents, to meet these AAU coaches, to meet the trainers, all these guys that are closer to these kids, and who the NBA guys probably never will get to all these people. They may try, they may call, but like you said, no one's in an AAU gym in
Right.
July. I
Well,
mean,
and one thing I think and I'm sure this is the same way with you, just knowing your character and everything, is I feel like a lot of people are feeling more comfortable as they get to know me because I'm not trying to do these sleazy things, right? And so because
yep,
there's so many at that point, and just as well as I do, Jabari Smith and his dad have probably been hit up by anybody and everybody trying to get tight with them so they can make money off of them, and
yep,
so like, being in a spot where, I'm able to be honest, and I bring back what I said before is like being a coach's son. Like I've always looked at, okay, whatever I'm doing, I want to be a positive part of the business. And there's so much, corruptness going on at every level. And
hmm
like, I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Right. And so
yeah,
if I'm able to find success, in this, unique niche I've created for myself, sort of, an accident. I
hmm
want to do it the right way, right? And so, but it's like I think what's happening is over time, I've developed a reputation. People know I'm not a liar and a cheater, and it's like it's allowing me to have better relationships with people. And
hmm
so I mean, it's just something that I'm saying this just to encourage anybody that's listening to this of like,
yeah,
hey, let's do things the right way. It's all let's make the game better, not worse. And it's a hard business, regardless of the angle you're going at. But
right,
I mean, for me personally, I just have no interest of being one of the
yeah.
crooks.
No, I'm with you 100%. It's again, it's the game I love. Like same. I mean, outside of being married, it's the longest lasting relationship I've ever had in my life. It's my
Oh, it's been
long
longer than my
standing.
marriage. I've been
Yeah,
married for almost 10 years, but
right.
I mean,
Exactly.
don't get me wrong. My wife and my family are number one, but
Right.
my relationship's a little longer with
For sure.
basketball.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what I mean. So it's like it's everything. And so there are certain people who try to manipulate it, and there are people who give back to it. And so it makes a difference for sure. It does. And I guess even kind of being around it overall, there's so many more good people in it, but the people that do crappy stuff
Mhm.
always are at the forefront for some reason. And I think that's kind of the downside to it. But there's so many people who care about it and want
Oh yeah,
want
it's
to.
not like
Yeah,
everybody's bad
yeah,
people in this business,
yeah.
but not by any means. But
There's
there
enough
are
of
a
them.
lot of shakers and
There's enough.
movers. I mean, especially you go to these high school tournaments, like watch out.
Yep, exactly, for sure, for sure, for sure. All right, so let's transition to the draft, right? So I know you guys just updated your big board. Um, let's just talk about let's just talk about your top three right now. So you have Paolo at one, you have Jabari at two, you have Chet at three. There's a shift, right? I think you had was Chet at number one at some point.
Yeah, we started the year with Chet at one, Paulo at two. I think we had Jaden Hardy at three. Jabari was
Okay,
4 or 5.
okay.
And it's just, I mean, with those top three, current top three,
Hmm.
I mean, it's pick your poison, right? I mean, all three of them are terrific prospects. I mean,
Hmm.
if I'm a team in the lottery and you get one of those top three, like you're in a good spot.
Yeah.
With Paulo, the one thing that like separates him, from the others right now, which I mean, it's a close separation, is I like his ability and his potential to being a primary scorer.
Hmm.
I mean, isolation score. I mean, you need a bucket at the end of a game. Probably want to throw the ball to Paulo. When
Right.
he's 25 to 30, it's like I could envision him being one of the top scorers in the league, be able to put in
Hmm.
4 to 5. Tough kid. I mean, my confidence level that he's going to be a 20 and 10 type of guy is really high,
Hmm.
and you can't say that about players very often at this stage.
Right.
And Jabari. I mean, Jabari easily can make a run for the number one pick. I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts too, since you've known him and followed him for so long. But I watched him at South Florida, a few weeks ago or so, and
Hmm.
I was blown away. I'd seen him in high school stuff too, and he, for one, his body is really starting to fill out. I mean, the one
Yep.
thing I was concerned with in high school, he was pretty thin.
Hmm.
Um, in his, he seems like he's coming out of a shell a little bit personality wise too. I thought he was sort of introverted, quiet
Hmm.
kid, maybe not an alpha in high school, and man, that's not an issue for me anymore with him. Like he's playing really feisty with a chip on
Hmm.
his shoulder. I mean, defensively, that guy could be special. I mean,
Hmm.
he's got the great, size, lateral quickness. I mean, explosive, really great defensive hands, and offensively, I mean, I think I wrote this like he's got the chance of being a prototypical modern day stretch four. I mean,
Yep.
shoots the ball with range, with ease, quick release, off the dribble. He's starting to show that he can create a little bit, with
Hmm.
putting on the deck a touch, and so athletic. I mean, I could go on about Jabari Smith. I just love the kid, right?
Right.
Um, and then Chet. I mean, Chet's so unique. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like I said, we started with him. At number one, the biggest impression he made on me was at Pangos a
Hmm.
couple years ago in Phoenix. It was funny. He and Paulo stole the show, and Jabari was there too.
Yep.
But Chet was unreal, and
Hmm.
his body is a concern, and it's one of those things where he just, having followed him for 3-4 years, he just hasn't gained any weight,
Yeah.
and granted, I think, he doesn't get put in vulnerable spots too often because he's so long. He's got great instincts defensively. I mean, he's one of the best natural shot blockers I've maybe
Yep.
ever seen.
Hmm.
But I mean, when we're talking about really high level prospects, you do
Hmm.
have to nitpick, and there's got to be I have to make decisions of how I rank these guys, and it's
Hmm.
every single spot is hard. We take it
Yeah.
seriously, because I
Yeah.
do believe, not just ours, but like all the handful of top mock drafts and all that, like they do have influence on things. Like when I was an agent, we look at these, try and figure out like where the guy's market was when we try and
Hmm.
get a guy a loan after his college season before the draft, insurance policy. They all look at our mock drafts, and I mean
Yeah.
that's just gives you a taste of like, this is real. And then players and parents and agents, like they use this as a piece of deciding whether they come out early or they go back to school. And so so we look at everything closely, and I take it seriously because I think, in an indirect way, it's sort of advising, different people within the industry.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that indirectly we have an impact on livelihoods almost, and so it matters. I mean, it may be something small to somebody else, somebody may be dismissive of it, but like you said, there's so many things that are moving on behind the scenes that pretty much come right off of this, and maybe not just this one, but a bunch of them, and people factor all that stuff in, and so it definitely makes an impact for sure. So yeah, so Paolo's ability to kind of be a number one primary scorer, Jabari's, prototypical stretch four, modern stretch four, and Chet's uniqueness as a whole. So like I guess the thing first is, so Paolo probably, in my opinion, and I think even wherever he was ranked, he seemed to be the most I guess he had the most transferable skill sets, right? Like and then the physicality that he plays with too. So like the best line I've ever heard him say is that he's like, I'm 6'10". Like it was just like, it was one of those things. He was like one of those little day in the life shows I watched. He's like, I'm really 6'10". I'm 250 pounds. Like it's a matter of fact. And so for me, that was the most like, he knows who he is already. It's like he said, some of these guys like Jabari filled out, Chet needs to fill out. He knows that he's a big dude,
Right.
and so that for me, that's a telling sign of like how he probably will play, because he knows that I'm bigger. I'm probably going to be bigger than most people. Even if I'm not bigger than you, you're not bigger than me either. So like we're gonna have to size up and see who wins. And that's okay. So it's like a puncher's chance. Like you may get me, I may get you, but at least there won't be any like, oh well, he needs to gain a little weight. So I think that was the first thing. His ability to kind of, like you said, go in that mid post area and create his own shot. That's, people love threes and dunks, right? But you and I both know the really special players in this league shoot mid-range jumpers still a lot.
Sure.
And he goes into that mid post, and he'll post you up, or he'll face you up. And so that's a uniqueness that I like about him in particular. Again, I'm with you with Jabari. Just everything about the kid I love. Even I interviewed him his senior year, and he was so professional. It was like the most professional interview I had ever had with a high school kid. Even down to the light. He was set up his lighting before, like we got on this call. He set up his lighting. He made sure his shirt was like like flat. It was just and then he started talking about, he was like, the best players in the NBA, they don't do a lot, and he said they're very intentional about where they move, how they get their shots, and he wanted to be that same way. And so you watched him in high school. You give him the ball at the free throw line area, and he was going to jab step you, pump fake you until you moved, and when you got bounce, you shoot over top of you. Defensively, he was going to stay vertical. He's sliding his feet, so all those things. And for me, that's again transferable. Like that's the kind of stuff that you want, even without the stuff that he's doing now, the personality stuff that's kind of coming out, and the ability to kind of put the ball on the floor a little bit. That was like, those are transferable skill sets to college and to the next level. And then, like you said, Chet's uniqueness as just like, you're right. I think he probably is one of the best shot blockers I've ever seen. And the crazy thing is, last year I thought Evan was, right? Evan
Right.
was, again, Evan was like that. Evan was like same thing, very unique, very instinctual, skilled overall. And so it's crazy, but like, yeah, Chet's probably a better shot blocker. He's obviously a little bigger and longer, but like that stuff matters too. Those extra few inches always, that's a $10 million pay increase sometimes, just because
Sure.
your wingspan's
I
too
will say
stronger.
this. Sorry to cut you off. I will say this with Chet. I compare him to Mobley, and he's definitely in the same mold, right? It's like, are they a 4? Are they a 5? They're kind of like float between both, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it could potentially be a great thing because it gives them versatility. They both shoot the ball well from outside. Evan's so much more athletic than Chet. That's one thing I think gives him an edge. And from a shot blocking, rim protection standpoint, I think Chet's better at the rim. Evan's changing shots all over the court. Like that's where I think Evan's a little different. So it's just it depends on how you're sort of like identifying them as rim protectors, right? So it's like, but it's sort of they're both special.
I think you're right though. I saw a play maybe it was last week on ESPN where Evan closed out on a 3-pointer and threw it into the stands, like from the paint. And so like that's the athleticism you're talking about right there. They'd be able to get out, recover, and actually not just contest the shot, but block the shot. So that's
Chet's a better shooter. That's one thing that Chet, he's their Gonzaga's team is so good. I'm actually going to see them again on Saturday versus Texas Tech, and I think he's he's sort of in a spot where he's not needing to force offense. They're not doing a whole lot through him. I think I think he's got more than people realize on that
Mm-hmm.
end, especially shooting. I think once he kind of gets more comfortable and really starts letting it fly,
Yeah.
I do think naturally he is a better shooter than Mobley.
Yeah, for sure. I would concur with you on that. It's one of those things. I sometimes like when like you say he's on such a really good team, and they're older too, right? This team
Right.
is like senior heavy and upperclassmen heavy.
Oh,
So
so
sometimes,
you got Nolan Hickman and Hunter Salas like not even playing. It's crazy.
right?
These guys are
You
5-star recruits.
exactly. And so that's the thing. So like when you're the baby, he's a baby, So
Right.
like, hey, we got Timmy who's we can give the ball to anytime we want to, and
Right.
what are we gonna do? And so
Right.
it's one of those things. So you have to kind of wait your turn almost, and his turn, unfortunately, may be when he gets to the NBA.
Right.
Just it may just be when they open his game up a little bit. How about this? Give me one dark horse that you have, not necessarily for like just a guy that maybe people aren't talking about as much that you think may have a good chance to be a really good pro at the next level.
I'd say the guy that comes to mind, Musa Diabate. I'm really high on the kid. And I mean,
Hmm.
especially early on in the season from a media standpoint, the
Hmm.
big guy just don't get that much love just because of how the game's played right now. And I get it, and I understand it, and I agree with it to a certain extent.
Hmm.
But this kid's kind of falling the same like what we're talking about with Chet and these freshmen at Gonzaga. Michigan's a very good team, and
Yes.
Juwan has kind of like brought him along,
Hmm.
and um, I think Musa's just done such a terrific job. I mean, he's got great size. I mean, he's listed 6'11". He's probably 6'10".
Hmm.
Really long wingspan. Moves really well. Like defensively, he's got a chance of being special. And then I think he's skilled enough. I mean, he's just like a high motor, energetic,
Hmm.
athletic big. And he's got at the next level. I think he played the 4 or the 5. I think we've got him at like number 20 right now,
Hmm.
which I think we're higher on him than most.
Hmm.
So he's the one guy that comes to mind of like, hey, this guy's worth keeping an eye on.
For sure. Honestly, and again, another kid I saw in high school. Another kid. First time I saw him, Nike EYBL, thinking he's a sophomore at the time.
Mhm.
Playing with Scotty and Isaiah Todd. That's what he's playing with. So I mean, it's one of those things. I agree with you. I think that's a good, I didn't even think about him at all. And he's kind of like you said. Unfortunately, bigs don't get a lot of love. Um, but like you said, guys aren't running aren't they're not running offense too big most of the time. And if you are, you're typically an older big. It's not something that just they don't give the ball to freshmen often and let them go work. Um, okay, how about this? Um, Second round guy. I think well, you probably know this too, but second round guys are so much more valuable than they used to be. I remember what was 98, 99. Was that the year Miles Simon? Year Miles Simon came come out Arizona, right?
Yeah, it
Player of
sounds
the
right.
year.
Somewhere
Yeah.
around there. Yeah.
So player of the year, right? Just taking his team to the Elite Eight after winning the national championship the year before. He's drafted in the second round, and he has no NBA career whatsoever.
Hmm.
Like nowadays, you get drafted in the second round, you're probably gonna get a guaranteed especially if you're drafted like that that next 10, so 31 to 40, you're
Right.
probably gonna get a guaranteed contract. So are there any second round projected guys that you think could have a really big impact?
Yeah,
Um,
I get this question a lot. I mean, especially as we
mhm,
get closer to the draft. It's a hard one because, I mean, if I'm that high on a guy that is got potential of being a 30 to 40 guy, he probably should be a first round pick. You know what I mean? So it's just
yeah.
depends on who you're talking to. I mean,
Mhm,
there's a number of guys that we have projected in like the early 30s
mhm,
that I think have a chance to be really good. I mean, a couple of wings. I mean, the two UCLA kids, we like both of them with
mhm.
Juzang and Jaquez. Um, uh, 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 Julian Champagny at St. John's,
Like him a lot.
a big shooter. Again, I mean, all these guys could they be late first round picks?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, Caleb Love at North Carolina. I
Mhm,
mean, he had the really bad freshman year at Carolina. Their whole team did.
mhm,
I actually saw Michigan at Carolina a couple weeks ago. Diabate was terrific, by the way.
mhm,
North Carolina beat them, and Caleb Love was pretty much their offensive engine. And I think one thing that's really helped him is
mhm,
he came into the UNC with such high expectations of being an on-ball point guard. I think
mhm.
they've realized, and it seems like he's becoming more comfortable with the idea of like I am a scoring guard,
Yeah.
and he's a bucket getter, and he's
Yeah.
assertive, and he's got energy, he's athletic, he's strong.
Mhm.
I like him. If he were to be a guy that's in the second round, I could see him being a really good pick. And it seems like a lot of people have written him off because he had such a bad freshman year.
Right.
I think he's pretty dang good.
and I agree. And I feel like it's so unfair too, because it's so hard. I mean, I think we assume that because you're a highly touted high school player that you're automatically going to walk onto a college campus, and it's not that simple all the time. I mean, there's so many variables that take place in college, and again, it's physicality, it's the strength. These guys are grown up. Some of these guys are like, I watched Western Kentucky blow out Ole Miss the other day. Western Kentucky has like 3 like super seniors. Like these guys are like old. They're like, you know, in respect to like a freshman, they're grown
Oh
ups.
yeah.
You know? I mean, these
Right.
guys 23 years old, 24 years old. I mean, so that's a huge that's a physical difference in just maturity and even
Oh,
IQ
for sure.
sometimes. And so I think it's people want to, you can write off somebody too fast sometimes, you know, and sometimes people need a little more time to kind of grow and groom. And then to kind of piggyback off something you said earlier too, I'm one of those. I'm a believer that the next 10 are all, in my opinion, could be very easily be first round picks in the draft. So that 20 to, I feel like that 20 to 40 range. I mean, at that point, it's just who's picking, you know. So like I feel like if the guy that had a pick early in the second round had those picks, they probably take those guys earlier, and vice versa. So it just depends. That's why I think those picks are so
Yep.
valuable still.
Well, you know, and one thing that, especially this time of year, that's really hard. I mean, we talk about this a lot with the freshmen that are having up and down years or inconsistent playing time. I mean, at what point do we have guys in and we not? And so, I mean, guys that we're projecting, you know, past, you know, the early 30s, if they're a freshman, I'm probably pulling them out because it's just, I don't want to be part of, you know, pushing them out of school too early, you know. And,
Right.
you know, obviously, as we get close to the draft, I mean, a lot of these things, you know, kind of come to the surface of like what the players' intentions are. Are they sign with an agent? Are they test the waters? Are they in for good? And we sort of adjust rankings based off that information. But I mean, it really throws it off right now. I mean, we've got so many guys that are young that are on the fence that we could easily put in, and it's, you know, what's the right way of doing it? I don't know. I mean, we're kind of just doing our best, you know, but it's challenging.
For sure. All right, Matt. Well, I'm going to let you go. I've stolen up your time for the day. I know you just got back in from the road, so I won't hold you too much. But I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I think this is going to be, you know, just hearing your story overall, and just like you said, this unique niche you kind of carved out for yourself. I think it should be encouraging to a lot of people because, you know, most people see a few avenues in sports. And the thing is, there's so many different lanes that you could find, and sometimes, like you say, you have to create something for yourself that's unique. That, you know, you create a need that maybe someone didn't know they needed until you create it. So, like I said, look forward to seeing you on the road at some point. I'm sure I'll see you here real soon, for sure. But
I'll say it. Sorry. No, I would say thanks a lot for having me, James. I mean, it's you're one of the good ones in my book, and I appreciate you saying all the nice stuff, and just, you know, keep doing what you're doing, and I think you're doing a great job, and we'll see you on the scouting trail, right?
Yes, sir, for sure.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Attacking the Paint featuring Matt Babcock. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be on the lookout for our next episode featuring Scott A. Hill, CEO and co-founder of Basketball News. Until next time, peace.